I do believe that Russia will become much more closer to China simply because there are only a few other options left.
Dear friends, welcome to another edition of Forum 2000 Online Chats. My name is Martin Ehl. I'm from Czech economy daily Hospodářské, noviny. Our guest today is Vladimir Rouvinski, a Russian scholar, expert on international relations from 2007, based in Icesi University in Cali, Colombia. Welcome to our chat, Vladimir.
Thank you very much for this invitation. It's a pleasure for me.
Vladimir is an expert on Russian relations to Asia and Latin America. Currently, there is a huge debate about the Russian relations to China, which would go through profound change, expectedly due to the consequences of the war in Ukraine. So let's start with this topic. I have an easy question at the beginning. Will Russia become weaker partner of China as a result of Ukraine war?
I think it depends on China, actually, because China is the key actor in the developments that are taken today in Europe. But China at this moment is in sort of a position of standby, because China doesn't want to rush and make any mistakes that may place into question China's relations with the West still. For Russia, however, I think the relations with China inevitably will become the most important ones, because what Russia is doing now is cutting all the relations with the West. The West is responding in a similar way, simply because there is no other tool available for the West to pressure Russia of Vladimir Putin to stop what they're doing in Ukraine. So I think it's inevitable that we will be seeing the most important changes in Russia's-Chinese relation, perhaps since the end of the Cold War. I do believe that Russia will become much more closer to China simply because there are only a few other options left. But once again, it depends on China. China will be the actor that will be defining the rule of the games, the rules of coexistence between China and Russia, not Russia.
Is it possible to say now how Chinese leadership would exploit current Russian position in terms of better deals on gas or something like that?
Of course, we have already seen some of the new contracts that have been signed between China and Russia, gas supply to China. And what we know about those contracts, China was able actually to put some of the conditions that are not very convenient for Russians. For example, as far as we know, the prices for gas are much lower in the case of Russia-China connection that, for example, in Europe or other markets that Russia supply gas. So we see that China is taking advantage, logically, of the weaker position that Russia have nowadays. And I think, yes, in the future, we will see more energy deals between China and Russia. China has also money to invest in some of the new fields in Siberia that Russia is desperate to have someone who will invest the money, because some of the established gas fields or oil fields are close to end of their lifeline. So they need someone to invest in the new infrastructure in Siberia, because there are no routes still. They have to be built. And China perhaps is the only one major player who is capable to carry out with those finances.
There is also a question looming over the horizon about the military cooperation between Russia and China. Do you see any possibility there, or China will step back in this specific field?
This is an excellent question. It's a very interesting one, because I think there is a stereotypes, at least among some of the experts, even experts on the international arena, when they talk about cooperation between China and Russia, because they see it's like a natural alliance that Russia and China are building against the United States. But we have to remember that Russia actually is kind of afraid about what China can do in the near future, because they have a huge frontier. Russia does not have a significant part of its population in Asia. Most of the Russians living in the European part of Russia. So there has been a lot of pressure, both from that part of population, Russians living next to the border with China, who are afraid of this growing importance of China and growing weight of China in the interactions on the frontier, and they are witnessing firsthand those interactions. But also from Russian perspective, China is using Russian technologies, stealing Russian technologies to improve their own arms. So Russia has like double considerations to take into account. On the one hand, they believe it's convenient for them to have this kind of cooperation with China. Once again, China is the customer that have money, a customer who does not watch a lot of to the West, to the United States, even though China also has to be careful about that. But they're also afraid that China may become in the future more powerful in military terms than Russia, and then Russia, of course, will have a very good position. So there is a kind of they try to sit on the two chairs at the same time. On the one hand, to expand their cooperation with China, including military cooperation, but the other chair is, of course, their consideration, their fear that China may overcome Russia in terms of military power, and combined with the economic power of China, it's something that Russia doesn't want to see in the future.
Kind of ironical question: will China buy Russian weapons after what we are seeing in Ukraine is happening to them?
Well, I think for China, it's not a problem at all. Also, I do understand from what I see from some of the sources I have that Chinese are watching very carefully the performance of the Russian weaponry on the Ukrainian theater. We do see that Russians are trying to use and do use new kind of weapons, hypersonic weapons. They use artillery, some new weaponry, some technology. So Chinese are very interested in seeing the real performance of that weapons in a real war. So I think they would not hesitate at all to buy the weapons simply because of the conflict in Ukraine. They don't have any ethical, I would say, limitation in that sense. If the weapons showing a good performance, they definitely will look after them.
I mean, mostly the performance, which doesn't look, as expected in some cases.
Yes and no. With all the respect, I think Russians, of course, failed in their strategy. The conventional warfare seems to be not the best in the hands of the Russians. But the weapons, I think the use of the weapons is something different because we've seen some success in that terms, in the use of the weapons by the Russians. I think all major military powers are watching very careful on that. There have been a lot of failures. I think the old war is it's a failure for Russia. I mean, there is no doubt in that. It's obvious that they failed in strategy. But the use of the weapons at some aspects have been quite interesting from the point of military experts.
The other question of Russian-China cooperation is the sanctions which are imposed on Russia, that China might help to circumvent them and help Russian economy. Do you think that China will be willing to risk kind of at least trade war with West because of Russian sanctions?
It is a complex question and it is a complex answer because China, of course, has a great deal of interdependency with the United States. The United States, by far, the most important market for China. The world economic architecture is still in the hands of the United States. We have to recognize this, and Chinese are not stupid. They understand this. On the other hand, the Chinese economy is also huge. So there are many sectors of the economy where Chinese can help Russians to overcome the pressure of the West sanctions without being hit back by the sanction of the United States. Gas, as we mentioned, and gas is one of those sectors, but also consumer goods, also some kind of trades. Russia, by the way, from what I know, at least some of the businessmen in Russia, in the Asian part of Russia, is now using, for example, Mongolia as a kind of a gateway towards the West and towards China. So there will be a lot of new schemes that Russia will be using very skillfully in order to overcome the Western pressure. The question still remains to what extent China will be able to open that gateway and willing to do this. Once again, important market for China in the United States. China is very well aware of the control that the United States still have over the world economic system. So if they would have to choose between the United States and Russia, they will definitely stay with the United States. But again, they're interested in Russia, and they will be perhaps in limiting access. Will be provide limited access to Russia toward the entire world through the China.
Basically, the next question is about the big topic: democracies versus autocracies. China and Russia have signed a kind of a memorandum or agreement at the beginning of the Olympic Games, and in February, stating, or it was interpreted as a kind of a new alliance of two big powers against the Western democracies. Do you think that this still is valid with the perspective of what's happening in Russia, and how the Russian power is limited because of the sanctions and its behavior in the last couple of weeks? So should we be afraid of such a kind of alliance of autocracies?
I share your concern about the threats to democracy in the world. Unfortunately, we see many people started questioning democracy around the world, and this is something we have to do a lot about this, not to allow this to happen. And we see from that perspective, of course, the declaration that you mentioned, and still valid, unfortunately, this is a kind of a statement against the democratic world order, against the liberal world order. I think there is that kind of a compromise still is valid in terms of Chinese and Russian narratives, in terms of China's and Russia's view of what is the appropriate way to handle the politics inside their own countries. I think there is no change in that. Even more, in Russia today, we see that it's becoming actually a dictatorship. Even not this strong authoritarian regime that Putin built during all these years in the power. It's basically a dictatorship. And China, of course, it's not much different. So I think we have a lot of solidarity between these two authoritarian, totalitarian regimes that are interested in keeping the things this way. And of course, China by no means will criticize Putin for doing things he does inside the country. Neither Putin would criticize China. I think they have no issues in that. And this is the alliance. I would agree with you. We have to worry about that alliance, because they now not only keep that system inside the country, they try to show them as a reference model for many other countries. And I can see it clearly here in Latin America that many people have started watching China as an alternative, as a model alternative to democracy. And this is very dangerous.
This is exactly what I wanted to ask at the end of our conversation. How this very European war is reflected in Latin America, in Colombia, or in Brazil, where Mr. Bolsonaro is considered to be part of this authoritarian or tendency. How it's reflected in Venezuela as a ally of Russia?
I think one of the advantages we still have, and I very much hope we'll still continue to have this in the Americas, most of the countries in the Americas have very strong democratic institutions. I think we have managed during the last perhaps 20, 30 years after the horrible times of the dictatorships here, but we do manage to have very strong democratic institutions. Unfortunately, they failed in Venezuela, but because of the assault that was done by Chavez and Maduro on that institution, but I still believe that Venezuela has a future which is linked to democracy. But in the case of many other countries here in Latin America, I think the institution that we have is a kind of guarantee that we have that those kind of authoritarian regimes will not be able to take power here. And you mentioned Brazil. Yes, we have the quality of democracy quite low in Brazil, but we'll have elections this year, and let's see what happens. Of course, the other option perhaps not the best one, but when we have this the regime change, that actually one of the engine behind these protests that keep democracy alive. And we have seen this, despite of the changes of the governments in Latin America, they still stick to democratic way of living, and democracy to be the key of the way how the politics is done here. So I'm very optimistic Latin America in that sense. And then I hope that Venezuela also will be able to overcome the difficulties they have now. This is actually the responsibility of all international community to help Venezuela to do this.
And do you think that the war in Ukraine means the end of Russian-Venezuelan friendship, to say so?
I would not be rushing too much in that direction, because there are so many different actors involved. And of course, the future of Venezuela-Russian relations depends to a great degree of the politics by the United States. I am aware that there are different, of course, opinions inside the U.S. Political establishment how to deal with Venezuela, but I think there is a chance. There is a chance precisely because of the Russian war in Ukraine that it would be difficult to sell the idea of keeping cooperation with Russia alive, as Maduro was trying to do before the conflict. He made a lot of very important announcements saying that the cooperation with Russia will be growing, but those statements were done before the actual war started. I think that nowadays it would be much more difficult for him to continue support Russia because of the rejection, of course, in Latin America of what Russia is doing in Ukraine. And yes, I think we have a chance for Venezuela now. Let's see if the actors who are responsible for do the politics will take advantage of this and move the Venezuelan scenario towards a return to democracy.
Thank you, Vladimir. It was another Forum 2000 Online chat, this time with Vladimir Rouvinski from Icesi University in Cali, Colombia. Thank you very much, and stay with us on this channel.
Thank you very much for the invitation. It was a pleasure to talking to you.